Hello, and welcome to my channel. It's hard to really ascertain where it all began, really. Um, I could take it back to birth, or even further back to when intentional culture first began and recorded history, so to speak, the lineage of identity emerged, um, or further back to when the lineage of identity of genetic lineage, etc., etc., emerged, or you know, on further back, modeling to the past. Or I could take it back to the specific inception of this idea into myself, uh, or the inception of the conditions that led up to the inception of the idea. Uh, but in order to in order to communicate this most efficiently to a potential listener, should one exist, I need to I need to take a non-linear occurrence and format it into a linear expression that this what I'm about to convey is a thing that happened in a format that doesn't quite fit what I'm going to say. I mean, it all is true, but it didn't just occur just like that. That it's something that, over time evolved and was broken into these other concurrent narratives with other things woven into them. So it's not just like, oh, I just decided to do this one day and started doing it just like this, that, and that. That it was a process. But for the purposes of communication, I am rendering it down into a simple, structured, theoretical format. And that is that Noam Chomsky theorized about this universal grammar, this cognitive toolkit, essentially, that's universal and innate within human consciousness, and that is a precursor to actual, to not to actual, a precursor to our relative expressive languages, and that is I guess you could say, a universal mechanic that is woven and evident throughout all of them. That is a unifier, and not just a unifier, but the precursor to all of the languages, and essentially Ein'Ra-Shah is a model of what he is talking about. And how I attained this, this intentional seed for a universal language, for an analog for a universal language, is through rigorous, rigorous use of dimethyltryptamine and of and the fire, combined with the fire. Unfortunately, for the purposes of honesty, I have to include a great amount of methamphetamine was also played into that. Uh, that I'm discrediting my case before I even make it. This is the wisest way to always present an argument, isn't it? But this is just what happened, right? So that I used the DMT to constantly be breaking down my focal regard and the way that my mind filtered information into systems of relevance, and then using the methamphetamine to extend that to uh, irrational lengths and to really push the boundaries into psychosis really hard as I did so. And I really, really did so. And in so doing, though, that beginning with an intention of, because once I did DMT, I saw that, okay, cool, there is this thing going on here, that when I do the DMT, all of a sudden the parts of me that are latent aren't so latent anymore. uh, the implicit mechanics of in here all of a sudden are becoming more explicit out here in ways that other substances have not done so. And I found in the doing of it, in the experiencing of it, an immensity of relief, joy, and and intuitive wisdom, and the erasure of certain lies in a really compressed, fast format. I was like, wow, okay, so this just rendered all of these effects unto me. And it did so because of this, and that. A little more complex than that. But my thought was that if I can go into this and I can extract what this is doing for me and compress it into, well, at first I was going to write a book, right? Uh, but what it came into over time was compress it into a book, a actionable metaphor that could then be conveyed to a user so they could gain the same result without the other analog. Uh, and and all my other things have emerged from that process, that I would intentionally take it with me everywhere and partake of it in like every conditional scenario that I could possibly do so without being arrested, which was very, I don't know how I wasn't, to be honest. Honestly, I don't know how I survived this process, as I would be doing extremely reckless things while blasted off on DMT regularly and documenting internally and externally the mechanical processes and compressing that into relative symbolism so that I could sequence it into higher form theory. I could start to build a rough model of a higher structure than I could immediately observe, and to make errors and be comfortable with the making of the errors, because that wasn't it contingency over course of action, and that I was building up to gain a sketch of totality. And that would mean that I would have to get a lot of misses so I could model negative space for any given perspective. And then once I would shift perspective, then I would be shifting my negative space. And I would have to undergo all of the same processes of mistake and deviance, and in order to model that perspective and to continue to do so in perpetuity. And then as I did so, I would have to devise new tools to access and capture the new properties that I was accessing, and then and so capturing then render them actionable. And as I devised the new tools, they just became the new platforms a step further and grab the next stage. And the tools just designed themselves, and what came out on the other end was just tool of auto-designed tool that had just emerged from infinitely small dot to infinitely large dot and collapsed back onto itself. And that it was just exactly what it started out as, but with this infinitely scalable structure of relative symbolism in between those 2 points, the law of 2 constants. And yeah, it's wild. It was pretty neat. It's been pretty neat. It still is pretty neat, because here I am on the other side of this experience, having walked out of it, out of the fire, walking in, burning away, emerging like a babe, freshly born, going through life with a new language, learning things anew as if I were a child. All my old assumptions are being rewritten. Um, it's very, yeah. Anyway, tangents. That that here I am now, sober. That I spent a good year of my time in that mode I described before, and then a good additional year minus the DMT plus the meth, trying to render this actionable, not rendering it actionable, but rendering it more uh, rendering more negative space, gaining a much more precise and accurate definition of actuality, of what is actually going on here, there, behind all of the symbolism that we use, that we sketch over the world for the purposes of identity and experience and intentional experience. And so at first I had to build the model of potentiality. Then I had to really get the model of actuality at the bottom. And now here I am getting a good model of reality right in the middle between those two things. That, I was where I was, and then I hit the potentiality roller coaster, shot all the way to the top. Bow! Top down model. Fell all the way to the bottom. Now bottom up structure. Reality. Top down model, bottom up structure. And that this is what the top down model, the universal system of definition, and the adaptive language of its expression, which combine together to make the universal language, or could be said as the listener's language, the lover's language, and the living language. Can you see the way that there's these symmetries emerging? The three that is one. No, the two that is one and the one that is three. Sorry, that's the way to say it better. My logic and my language. And that I don't actually remember exactly what thread I was on before, but I'm just gonna sally forth. My logic and my language are, if anything, what could be said of my experience in undergoing this auto design period by just letting the fire design this tool, by just building a model of becoming, plunging in headlong and failing miserably constantly, but with a utter commitment to the infallibility of my model. And just continuing to do so and allowing the fire to wear it away into an actual, actionable, realistic, plausible thing, to a pocket logic that can be just literally handed over to an individual, and in the 5 minutes is all it would take for an intentional listener and an intentional speaker to receive the instructions necessary for this entire thing to unpack on its own over time. Granted, 5 minutes from me, it would take a longer time, but let's say a month, and a lot can be done, but still, even then, too short of a frame, because this is kind of the whole point of the thing, is that it's not even about compressing it into like, oh, this is done to this. No, it's all an infinite arc. It's all an immeasurable sequence. That vita brevis, ars longa, life is short, art is long, force never stops communicating. That you plug in to the ongoing process until you're unplugged. And that's it. That it's not about, oh, I'm trying to get this done in this amount of time. It's like, no, I'm just going to plug into this immeasurable sequence. And that's how my life's going to be now on. Doesn't mean free. No, it means that it's going to, I'm not going to die. That's art of godhood mechanics. I don't need the tangent fully into that. But yeah, I just wanted to go ramble a bit about how this started, what it was like, and there you go. Thank you for your time.